Hey, how you doing? Nick Digilio here. Hey, thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. It's free. Check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/Nick D Show. Great way to help out, to keep my content going. All the stuff I do is DIY, these videos and things like that. And I want to keep the content going. I need a little help financially to keep things going. And to get these going. All this stuff I'm doing here outside of my podcast, all of that stuff, any bit can can help. So please go to patreon.com/Nick D Show, pick a tier and donate some dough, become a patron, subscribe $3, $9, $25 a month, whatever you want to do. You'll get bonuses. Down the line, we're going to do like live streaming and some other stuff, and you'll get bonus content, including behind-the-scenes videos of what really happened at WGN with some radio stories that only patrons will get, including some of the crap that happened at WGN. So go to patreon.com/Nick D Show, subscribe today, give some dough today. Really appreciate it. My podcast, every Tuesday and Friday, new episodes of the Nick D Podcast drop. Please subscribe to that. That's free. And it's at the Radio Misfits Podcast Network, radiomisfits.com. All right, sad news late last night. It's Valentine's Day. And by the way, fuck Valentine's Day. One of the worst days of the year. I hate it. In honor of this shitty, stupid, fake holiday, fuck Valentine's Day. I hate it. I will be watching this. That's right. The most romantic movie ever made, War of the Roses, and I'll follow it up with Shoot the Moon with Diane Keaton and Albert Finney, best movie ever made about divorce. Those are both perfect movies to watch on shitty, fuck you, Valentine's Day. Boom. Anyway, some terrible news late last night. Ivan Reitman passed away. Ivan Reitman, one of the key guys in the creation of some of the most important comedies in my life and of my generation, of people around my age. I'll be 57 this year, and the kind of comedies and the kind of material and the kind of movies that Ivan Reitman helped create formed my sense of humor and my generation, Generation X, hugely. This guy was a major voice and a major contributor to the creation of some really, really important and seminal comedies of my life. So Ivan Reitman passed away. He was 75 years old. There was no reason, or they didn't give a reason for his death or how he died. But a guy who was a writer, a major league producer, executive producer, and producer of some amazing stuff, and a really good director of comedies, passed away, 75 years old. And that's a big hit. It's a huge hit for someone my age, and for someone who was as into that comedy world, the creation of that comedy world, because I'm of the age, at the very beginning, the creation of Saturday Night Live. And I am one of those people that was of the age when that first set of Saturday Night Live stars became movie stars. And that type of comedy that came out of that world of improvisation, the world of Second City, that's the beginning of it. And I was there as a huge fan, and as someone whose sense of humor and style and writing and anything that ever had to do with comedy, whether it be theater or any of that kind of stuff, that was the comedy that formed me, that helped form me. And Ivan Reitman was a guy who helped create a lot of that. And to lose him was he was huge. It was huge. And he was born in Czechoslovakia, came to Canada, and made a home base there with his parents and family, and lived in Toronto for a long time, and became a voice in the entertainment world. As a young kid, he used to do puppet shows. He was in a folk music group. Loved comedy as a young kid. Was influenced by a lot of the younger stand-up comedians. And in the world of television, in the early days of television, and was right there on the cusp of edgy comedy when it was happening in the Canadian world. There, he hooked up with Dan Aykroyd, fellow Canadian, and in the world of Second City and in the world of Canadian comedy, He produced a show called Greed, which was a weekly Canadian, low-budget Canadian television series that starred Dan Aykroyd, and Reitman had this sort of cutting-edge sensibility of comedy, got hooked up with those people in Canada, and then immediately segued himself into the world of National Lampoon and started working with the Lampoon people as a writer, a somewhat of a performer, but a behind-the-scenes guy. He sort of made things happen, which is what he did mostly in movies. He wasn't quite as creative as Harold Ramis, who also passed away unfortunately, years ago. Ivan Reitman was more of a behind-the-scenes guy, not as creative as Harold Ramis, not quite the comedic genius that Harold Ramis was, the writer, the creator, the director that Harold Ramis was, the true genius and influencer. Ivan Reitman was a guy who recognized talent more than created really amazing things. He directed a lot of movies, was mostly a smart producer. He and Harold Ramis, they worked together a lot. They were responsible for a lot of great comedies, but the difference between Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis was a brilliant, genius, comedic mind who was a creator, a great performer, amazing writer, and amazing director, whereas Ivan Reitman was a genius in the business world of comedy. He could spot geniuses. He could spot comedic talent. He wasn't the best writer in the world. He wasn't the best creator in the world. He was a pretty good director. Wasn't a great director. But this guy knew talent and was able to make things happen. Ivan Reitman was a producer who made great things happen, who spotted great talent, who nursed great talent, who put great talent together, and who had this incredible mind and genius to put projects together where he would take some of the greatest comedic minds, get them together, and create some of the greatest comedic creations of all time. Ivan Reitman was the idea guy. He was the business guy. He was the guy who made shit happen. A ton of these movies would not have existed were it not for the cleverness of Ivan Reitman for getting the right comedic geniuses together. He kind of was the guy who guided the real creative people and put them together. He started out in low-budget movies. He made a movie called Cannibal Girls for $12,000 in Canada. In his early days as a producer, he worked with, this guy, again, Ivan Reitman was the architect of comedy. It was the architect of building good comedy. That's what he really did. He was an architect of building great comedy with people who could do it brilliantly and better than him. And even in regards of not comedy. He started working with David Cronenberg in the early days. David Cronenberg, only one of the greatest filmmakers that's ever lived, who continues to make great film after great film after great film, challenging movie, a guy who pushes the envelope in terms of creativity, content, and, just in terms of pushing the envelope in the world of film itself. Well, he worked with David Cronenberg in the early days. He produced Shivers, which was also called They Came From Within. He was also a producer on Rabid. A lot of the movies, the low-budget films that David Cronenberg started making out in Canada in the early days, a low budget, Reitman was the producer on. And he would go on to produce other things. The big thing happened, the big break. He worked with National Lampoon as a behind-the-scenes producer, and he produced Animal House. Boom. That was it. Working with guys like Harold Ramis and Doug Kenny and all the guys at National Lampoon, director John Landis. Animal House was made, and Animal House became a comedic classic, and he was the producer on it. Got all of those amazing comedic talents together in front of the camera, behind the camera, writers, director, all of that stuff. Ivan Reitman got them all together through his years of working with the geniuses and the comedy minds of the National Lampoon, put them all together, made Animal House, and it became a huge hit. Then he got behind the camera and started directing. His first movie as a director after that, he got Bill Murray. He signed on Bill Murray, became best friends with Bill Murray, and would work with Bill Murray on many, many projects. The first of which, after Animal House, was Meatballs. And then he would go on to direct other films as well. He would go on to do Stripes, which is, one of the three holy trinities of comedy. And Ivan Reitman directed Stripes, again working with the great Harold Ramis and getting incredible comedic talent together. John Candy, working with guys like Warren Oates, the incredible cast of that movie. And Ivan Reitman was the director of that film. And he worked behind the scenes a lot again. So here are some of the movies that Ivan Reitman produced. He was much more successful as a producer in terms of what he did. I mean, obviously, the Ghostbusters movies he directed. Now, if you know me at all, you know I'm not a Ghostbusters fan. Never was really a big Ghostbusters fan. My favorite Ghostbusters movie is the Paul Feig female one, like by far. I think it's not even close. The Paul Feig female Ghostbusters movie is the best of any of them. So I'm not a big Ghostbusters fan, but again, he put together geniuses. He got Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Bill Murray, Rick Moranis, Annie Potts, obviously, all of these comedic giants together made a commercially incredibly successful movie, very smartly produced, and it became a classic and iconic. And that's because of Ivan Reitman. Ivan Reitman produced stuff like Heavy Metal, the animated movie that was based on that the comic magazine Heavy Metal. He produced that. He produced Space Hunter, the 3D movie. He produced Big Shots. He produced Casual Sex, Feds, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. He produced the Beethoven movies, the movies with Saint Bernard, Charles Grodin. Those were his idea. He produced Space Jam, another movie and its sequel that made a ton of money. Now, whether or not you like these movies or not, that's not the point. The point is that he was an incredibly successful producer. Like, he knew how to put together talent. He knew how to make movies. He knew how to make them successful. The Late Shift, the HBO movie about the battle for The Tonight Show, between Letterman and Jay Leno, a terrific movie. He produced Private Parts, the great Howard Stern film. Ivan Reitman got that made, and Ivan Reitman worked to get that made. And he hired Betty Thomas to direct The Late Shift, and Private Parts. Nobody would ever hire Betty Thomas, who was like an actress on Hill Street Blues, to direct movies. Ivan Reitman started her directing career. He directed some of the comedies of the early 2000s, like Old School and Road Trip. He produced those. It was just kind of like, that new generation of making, sexy comedies or slob comedies. You know what? If you get Ivan Reitman's name, you got like the godfather of that genre. If his name is on like Euro Trip and Road Trip and Old School, then you've got the blessing of the godfather of that. He produced I Love You Man. He produced Post Grad, a lovely movie with Alexis Bledel. He produced it. His son went on to direct movies. Obviously, Jason Reitman has directed some really terrific films, and he produced some of those. And Jason Reitman directed the very successful Ghostbusters movie from last year, Afterlife, which Ivan produced. He produced the movie Hitchcock. He produced Father Figure, and then he would go on to direct other movies as well. Obviously, Ghostbusters, which will go down in history as one of the most successful films and iconic franchises in history, he put that all together. He directed Twins. He made Arnold Schwarzenegger a comedy actor. It was his idea to put Arnold Schwarzenegger in a comedy. He made Twins with him. He made Kindergarten Cop. He made Junior with him and Danny DeVito, those two with Danny DeVito. They were all successful movies, and nobody would ever expect Arnold Schwarzenegger to make comedies, let alone successful comedies that a lot of people thought were very funny. He directed 6 Days and 7 Nights, the romantic comedy with Anne Heche and Harrison Ford. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the business. He directed Legal Eagles, a Robert Redford, Deborah Winger comedy that was also really clever and kind of fun. He did that very well. A really underrated movie from the early 2000s called Evolution with Julianne Moore and David Duchovny, which is a very funny movie that not a lot of people have even really seen. He directed that. He directed Draft Day, the sports movie with Kevin Costner. He directed No Strings Attached, which was a movie that had no business being good. It was about it starred Ashton Kutcher and Natalie Portman, and it was about a male and female friend who cross the line and have sex, and they just become like sex buddies. And it came out weirdly enough at the same time as Friends with Benefits, which was another movie that had the same plot with Justin Timberlake and weirdly Mila Kunis. who would go on to marry Ashton Kutcher. So Ashton Kutcher and Natalie Portman starred in No Strings Attached, which was a surprisingly good movie about friends who fuck. And then Friends with Benefits was out at the same time, which was also a surprisingly good movie with the same plot with Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis. And both of those ended up really being very, very good. So he did that, No Strings Attached. He directed that. And he would continue to produce and be behind the scenes of TV shows and videos and things like that. He was an amazing talent at spotting really good talent and putting it together. He had a great sense of humor. People loved working with him. Apparently, he was a dream to work with. And he was a fucking producer that got shit done. You know? He got amazing writers and directors. He got amazing comedic talent that he was friends with, that he created with, put them together, produced, and sometimes directed some amazing and successful franchises and movies. He was a great mind, a smart businessman, and a really terrific producer. Now, as a director, I liked him. I thought he was a good director. But there's really only one movie that I thought that he went far above and beyond just being a basic director, like getting great comedy minds to write and create for him. My favorite movie in terms of the directing that Ivan Reitman did is a film called Dave, the political romantic comedy with Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver, and another written by Gary Ross, a terrific script. Ivan Reitman, his direction of that movie, and I think it was very similar to what he did with Legal Eagles and No Strings Attached, was really subtle and really beautiful, and he had a really great touch for light romantic comedy. He really did, as the guy who produced Animal House and directed sort of broad comedies like Stripes and Ghostbusters, which was a big, dumb, broad comedy. This guy had a great knack, and that, I think, was his strength. And he didn't do it enough. I don't think. His strength was really subtle, character-driven romantic comedy. And Dave is a great one. Dave is about sort of mistaken identity. It's kind of a takeoff on The Prince and the Pauper, where this regular guy, Dave, pretends to be the president because he looks exactly like him. Kind of a dual role for Kevin Kline, a great role for Sigourney Weaver, who obviously worked with Ivan Reitman on the Ghostbusters movies. And if you've not seen Dave, that's the first one that I would recommend you watching. Now, obviously, stuff like Animal House, which he produced, and Stripes, which he directed, and Ghostbusters. These are all classics that everybody talks about, and you can go back to and watch a million times. I mean, I've seen Stripes probably 7,000 times. But the first movie that I would recommend, if you want to do kind of a tribute by watching the great production work and the great directing work of Ivan Reitman, I would definitely suggest the first one you go back and watch is Dave. Ivan Reitman's contribution to the world of comedy is massive. To the world of comedy that touched my sensibility and helped form who I am today, Ivan Reitman is a name that is a stamp of approval. Like, he's one of the comedy gods. He was one of the comedy gods in that world. And his contributions to comedy are huge, are massive, and will always live on. The classic films, that he produced or was a part of, like your Animal House, your Stripes, Ghostbusters, and all of the stuff that followed that, Meatballs, all of these movies, and all of the work that he did with National Lampoon, and the fact that he got Animal House made. Ivan Reitman produced it. He got National Lampoon's Animal House made. For that alone, we should forever be grateful for that. That guy, Ivan Reitman, who just passed away, not only a terrific producer and a great director and a great eye for comedic talent and a great creator and producer, but the fucking guy got National Lampoon's Animal House made. Right there. Eternally grateful. He was only 75 years old. Obviously, condolences to his family. His son Jason has gone on to a massively, successful career as a director in his own right. But what Ivan Reitman contributed to the world of film and to the world of comedy is huge. So rest in peace, Ivan Reitman. Thank you for everything that you did. And number one, far and away, thank you so much, because you got Animal House made and the world changed. So thank you, Ivan Reitman. Rest in peace.